Pilgrim's Progress. The Pilgrim's Progress is an allegory by John Bunyan, published in 1678. It was written in prison. John Bunyan was a staunch puritan, who adopted preaching as his profession. In his autobiography he has depicted the story of his conversion. After the Restoration, Bunyan was imprisoned for his licensed preaching. It was in prison that he wrote the Pilgrim's Progress, in which he gives the story of the salvation of a Christian. Bunyan was a deeply and sincerely religious-minded man who loved the Bible in the most devoted manner. Emile Leguis says that Bunyan seemed to have lived with the scriptures alone, indifferent to every production of the human mind, occupied only with the quest for means of salvation. The story of the salvation of a Christian in the Pilgrim's Progress is set forth in the form of an allegory. In the beginning, the dream of the author is described, in which he sees Christian with a burden on his back, reading in his book that the city in which he and his family are living, the city of destruction, will be shortly consumed by fire. Christian prepares to run away from that city to the celestial city, heaven, along with his wife and children. But they cannot be convinced by him, and he takes to his journey alone. But his journey is not easy. His path is beset with numerous obstacles and temptations. In part 1, there is description of Christian's journey through such places as the Slough of Despond, the Valley of Shadow of Death, the Interpreter's House, Vanity Fair. And soon in the course of his journey Christian meets allegorical personages like Mr. Worldly Wiseman, Faithful, Giant Despair, and so forth. The encounter with them signifies the difficulties lying in the way of salvation. In part 2, there is a fine description of the journey of Christian's wife Christiana and her children to the same destination. She has a vision and starts her journey in the company of her neighbor Mercy, overruling the objections of people like Miss Timorous. Great Heart accompanies them as their guard and guide. He killed Giant Despair and other monsters and escorts the party safely to the celestial city, heaven. The simple story of the Pilgrim's Progress is all imaginary, but John Bunyan succeeds in enlivening the whole thing by his simplicity coupled with the strength of conviction. The style closely resembles in its strength, simplicity and vividness to that of the Bible. John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress has a lucidity and lifelikeness which even Edmund Spenser could not attain. John Bunyan is not merely didactic, but he shows a keen sense of landscape surroundings. In the Pilgrim's Progress there are some instances of humor and social satire also.